G'day, Chris Bowen from EFTM. Well, we're here west of Sydney in the Blue Mountains, and let me tell you, cyclonic conditions prevail here. It'll blow a dog off a chain, but we're here for the 2019 version of the Ford Everest, which of course is based on the Ford Ranger. This is a big refresh, and the headline act is a brand new power plant, a 2-litre bi-turbo diesel, which you can find in the Ford Raptor we saw in Bangkok earlier in the year. There's also the 3.2-litre 5-cylinder engine, which carries over from the previous model. New tech on board as well, Apple CarPlay as standard, autonomous emergency braking is there as well on some models. But we're going to go off-road over the next 2 days, and what better place than experience off-road performance than right here in the Blue Mountains. Okay, before we hit the open road, I'm back inside the nice warm comfort of the all-wheel drive Trend bi-turbo Everest, and I really want to focus on this engine. It's a 2-litre twin turbo, essentially diesel engine, pumping out 157 kilowatts of power and a lot of torque, 500 Newton meters of torque, matched to this new 10-speed automatic transmission. 10-speed. I mean, a couple of years ago, 8-speed was phenomenal, let alone 10, and this is on a Ford Everest. It's a great gearbox, much like it is in the Ford Mustang. The gear changes are almost imperceptible. They are just beautifully timed, and you barely notice them. There's hardly ever a case of the gearbox getting confused, no matter what gradient you are taking on. And in serene circumstances like this, where this car will spend a lot of time just hovering around and doing its best on normal urban roads, it's simply not a problem. You can put it in a sport mode if you want to tighten up some of the gear shifts, but really that's not required. For some reason though, the 3.2-litre 5-cylinder engine is still my personal preference. It just has seemingly a bit more punch, even though on paper it doesn't. I guess it just lacks those extra gear ratios, so first and second give you a bit more of a shove in the back, and that's what I like. Steering is light, it's electrically assisted. In fact, it's probably the lightest in the category. Some may not like that, particularly off-road. I do, I find it manoeuvrable, particularly when it comes to car parks, shopping centres and the like, but even just cruising along like we are here on the Great Western Highway, it just gives you a nice comfortable feel to what is essentially quite a heavy car. Now there are 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive options. You can take your pick. It depends on if you want the ambient, the Trend, or the top of the range titanium. It depends on how far your budget goes. I think all-wheel drive is worth it, obviously, if you want to go off-road, but it just gives you that extra surety as well in the wet, particularly through regions like this in the Blue Mountains when you can cop a bit of snow and sleet. And just looking at the conditions surrounding me right now, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened overnight. Look, this isn't the type of vehicle that you'll be throwing into corners with any great degree of gusto. The wheels will start to screech pretty quickly, letting you know that you're at the limit. But that's pretty obvious for a car of this nature. In terms of technology, you've got Ford's latest Sync 3 infotainment system, which is pretty good. It's got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. Also, autonomous emergency braking is available on the Trend and Titanium models. There's also pedestrian detection as well. Now, for those familiar with the region that we're in, the Blue Mountains of New South Wales, west of Sydney, we've taken quite a strange way to get here, leaving from Sydney Airport, heading down towards Wollongong or Bulli, back across through Picton and then up the Great Western Highway to Medlow Bath, where the Hydro Majestic Hotel is a fantastic location to stay. And that encompasses a whole range of terrain and driving conditions. We're averaging 8.8 litres per 100, which I think is pretty good, although the car is mostly unladen with only a maximum of 2 passengers on board at any time. Now, the Everest is essentially grafted onto the Ford Ranger platform, and that's not a bad thing. The Ford Ranger is one of the top-selling vehicles in the country, full stop, and there's a good reason for that. It's the best dual cab on the market. It's a solid platform, it's capable, it's good looking, and the Everest inherits most of that as well. I mean, apart from the fact you've got the wagon end of the 7 seats, you've just got that trucky front end. It's got that American feel, the revised front grille. It's one of the better looking SUVs on the market in this particular space. So I think that's why a lot of buyers are drawn to it, despite the fact you do need to actually outlay a fair bit of coin to get your hands on one. Okay, so we've had the opportunity to go off-road, and look, it's a capable vehicle, there's no doubt about it. We've got all the 4-wheel drive models on display here. What Ford have done, essentially, is add a fair dose of Mr. Sheen to what was already a very polished effort. There's significant improvements in NVH levels. It's a lot more refined, there's no doubt about it. It feels much plusher on the road, and the new suspension stabilizer bars is very noticeable. It just sits flatter and is a better performing SUV in general. It doesn't have that trucky feel that the previous Everest did. They've realised that most of these vehicles won't go beyond the city limits. They won't get a speck of mud on them. So there's things like autonomous emergency braking as standard on the Trend and Titanium models. Apple CarPlay, we love that. It's standard right across the range. Pedestrian detection, speed sign recognition is also standard across the range. Many of the touch points are a lot softer, so it's a very refined, more comfortable experience as opposed to the previous Everest, which felt a lot more trucky. We've got the option of 2 engines, the bi-turbo diesel, the 2-litre, which is a bit of a controversial addition to the range. You can option that in the Trend model, and you can select the 3.25 cylinder engine if you so desire, but the top of the range Titanium model, that's the only choice you get. So if you're a capacity person, that may well be an issue for you. But the real highlight for me with that engine is the pairing with the 10-speed transmission. It's fantastic, and it's certainly not left wanting in these sorts of conditions, and will also be a great towing transmission engine combo. Overall, look, this is probably the leading SUV when it comes to these really truck-style wagons that are based on a dual cab platform. It's the 2019 Ford Everest. We'll have full pricing details at EFTM.com.